What an inflationary introduction. My goodness. Thank you so much for the chance to be with you. And I think what I'd like to do is make this a filibuster-free zone. A rule in Washington ought to be friends don't filibuster friends. And I think your work is particularly important, and it grows more important every single day. I mean, in the last 48 hours now, there's essentially been an announcement that the Russian government is responsible for the hack into American election systems, into American political organizations. And so if there ever was a question, now is not the time to weaken strong encryption in America. You just try to wrap your arms around it. And obviously, Americans are concerned about their security, and they're concerned about their liberty, and we're getting policies that are essentially offering less of both. And that is certainly the case in this drive to weaken strong encryption, led by the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Put your arms around that. And the reality is, what we've got to do, and it's going to be critical because in the next 90 days, there are going to be big decisions, in my view, around three issues. Not just the future of strong encryption, but whether the FBI is going to be able to get access to your browsing history without anything resembling court oversight. I'm telling you, browsing history is going to make metadata look like small potatoes. And then, of course, we have the question of whether or not the government is going to be able, with essentially one warrant, hack into hundreds of thousands of computers. Now, remember, this is the government that didn't get the OPM situation right. And now we're going to say one warrant, one judge can hack millions of computers. And so I think I'd just like to spend a few minutes kind of walking through what I think the challenge is and what we're going to have to do. Because essentially, over the next 60 to 90 days, we're going to see big decisions made that are going to have an enormous effect on our digital security, on our liberty, on our ability to have high-skill, high-wage jobs at good-paying companies that are offering opportunities. That was certainly what we saw after the Snowden disclosures. We saw people all over the world saying, gee, we don't feel we can be confident about American products. So for a few minutes, let me just kind of walk through these decisions. And in effect, what the argument that is constantly offered by politicians and intelligence agencies that are, in effect, pushing these flawed tech approaches is it really comes down to two words: trust us. When the news broke that the NSA was conducting mass surveillance of Americans' phone records, these were the people who said, the government knows everybody you call, what time and where you called from, but don't worry about it. Trust us. When the FBI director, Mr. Comey, tried to force Apple to build a backdoor into the iPhone, he said, trust us. It's just one phone. That's an exact quote. It's just one phone. Apple can build a backdoor that only the government can use and hackers and spies won't be able to open. And it wasn't more than like 10 days before you opened up your paper and you saw that the district attorney from New York had more than 100 phones that he was working on. And as I say, the government is asking for the power to hack millions of innocent Americans with one warrant, one judge, to find one criminal hacker. And by the way, if Congress does what it does best, which is nothing, this goes into effect automatically. Okay? No hearings, no votes in Congress, no big debates, no members of Congress getting all worked up and red in the face. It just goes into effect because it is Rule 41, and we've had cybersecurity experts across the country sound an alarm. They said that a bungled hack could brick your phone, crash computer systems at hospitals or on the power grid or other critical systems. And what did the Justice Department said? Trust us. We can hack lots of Americans, no collateral damage. So, the very first thing that I wanted to come today and say clearly is don't use those two words, use three. Don't trust them. It is our job, to recognize that the only protections that the American people can count on are those that are actually written into black letter law and are accompanied by vigorous oversight from the courts, from Congress, and from outside watchdogs. So let me just give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about, because clearly when the government says trust us, there's a lot of evidence that says you might want to consider hightailing the other way. There have obviously been many reports about stolen NSA hacking tools or secret malware that's escaped into the wild, and even about efforts to weaken cybersecurity across the board, which have not been confirmed by the executive branch. Now, I can't comment on those kinds of matters as a member of the Intelligence Committee, but the incidents the executive branch has confirmed ought to be just as troublesome to the public. There is no doubt that more data about innocent Americans the government holds, the greater chance it's going to get stolen by hackers from Russia, North Korea, or some other place that isn't friendly to our country. We know when OMB was hacked and the bad guys stole millions of sensitive files affecting millions of government agencies, including intelligence and military personnel. Hackers stole fingerprints, social security numbers, and background investigations. They had access to applications for security clearances which contain intimate personal secrets. One former NSA attorney said that the hack gave foreign spies access to the crown jewels. Now, you would think, since this was a federal system, the executive branch would have a strong incentive to keep the information safe. But that situation with OPM, the federal system, was not the only time that our government has lost sensitive information. I could literally spend the whole speech going through some data breaches. Energy Department hacked 150 times between 2010 and 2014. The State Department's unclassified email system hacked. Just this month, another contractor charged with the theft of classified documents. And so everybody also knows there's another famous ex-NSA contractor who came away with some government secrets. So when the government says, trust us with your private data, I say, hold on to your wallet. And I'm going to go through a handful of the examples with respect to the big fights coming up. Now, every time there is a story about encryption and encryption backdoors, and that's what Richard Burr, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, wants to do. He wants to require, as a policy, that companies build backdoors into their products. And we keep saying, hey, the second you build a backdoor because you think you're helping a good guy, you've got to remember bad guys can access the same backdoor. And so one of the reasons I wanted to come today, because we've got so many tech-savvy people here in the room, is to say that it is critically important, and I've been pushing back as hard as I can, to make sure that people understand the debate about encryption is not a debate about privacy versus security. After the Apple iPhone discussion, there were probably tens of thousands of articles saying today, in the ongoing debate between privacy and security, the following happened. So we spent a lot of time. I went to DEF CON in San Francisco, and I said, no, the debate is not privacy versus security. The debate is more security versus less security. And if you really want to be secure in a dangerous world, you're not going to weaken encryption. You're going to do everything you can to strengthen encryption. I mean, take out your smartphone. It's got a location tracker. If you're a parent, that's one of the ways you keep tabs on a child. You want to weaken the personal security of Americans, go along with these proposals in the Congress and that the FBI has been interested in to walk us back from strong encryption. I just want you to know, if a bill comes out of the Intelligence Committee or comes out of any other committee to weaken strong encryption in America, I'm going to go to the floor of the United States Senate and I will filibuster that bill. I will do everything. I will do everything in my power to block a bill that is a loser from a security standpoint, it is a loser from a liberty standpoint, it is a loser from an economic competitiveness standpoint. It is critically important. And goodness, based on what you heard from the Russians, how are you going to be for weakening encryption on the basis of what you've seen in the last 24 hours, acknowledged by the intelligence leadership itself? So I really appreciate everybody's willingness to stay in that fight. The second one will be the browsing history battle. This was an amendment that came up during one of the sort of must-pass bills right before we broke for the summer, and nobody had really heard very much, about it. It just sort of popped up out of nowhere, and we heard from a lot of technologists and the like, and they said, will you fight it? And I said, look, I'm going to, but I think coming out of nowhere and after we had another set of threats disclosed publicly, this is going to be tough. And what happened was I went to the floor of the Senate and I said, let me just unpack this for a second. What we're talking about are national security letters that get issued without a judge. The FBI wants to be able to get access to people's browsing history. And the second I said the word browsing, people said, I get it now. This is the prism, as you know, right into people's innermost thoughts. And my guess is there are probably lots of elected officials not wild about their browsing history. So, we were told we wouldn't be able to hold it off. It was pushed by Senator Burr and Senator McCain. And everybody said, oh, Ron's going to go out there, he's going to talk for a while, and they'll get 10, 12 votes. We got 38 votes. We got enough votes to hold them off. There were a couple of senators missing. But folks, that bill is going to be back in the fall. They actually were thinking about attaching it to something else. And I just hope we can get the word out across America that this is a proposal to get access to people's browsing history without any judicial oversight at all. This really steps back from what our country wants, which is to focus on real threats and not go on fishing expeditions. So that will be coming up in the fall, and was actually attached to something right before we left. I thought we'd have to have another vote, and we, as I say, were able to get just enough votes because some senators were missing to hold it off. But I want everybody at home to understand what that challenge is. So, encryption, the question of browsing history and national security letters, and then Rule 41. Now, Rule 41 is not exactly something people talk about at the local coffee shop, okay? It's an obscure, bureaucratic process. One technologist said the government was using it so that they could operate under the cover of dullness. And under it, the government could soon have the power to get a single warrant to hack thousands or even millions of computers, phones, and other digital devices. Here's how it works. One of your uncles, let's call him Jack, falls victim to a basic, stupid phishing attack. You know what kind of phishing attack we're talking about. Now his computer, unbeknownst to him, is part of a botnet. Then the government comes along and is trying to figure out who's controlling the botnet, which is, say, sending spam emails. So the government hacks Jack's computer again using malware that has never been publicly vetted by anybody who's really knowledgeable about the digital sector on the outside. So Jack, in effect, got hacked twice, and that computer is even more vulnerable to attacks in the future. Now, if you think that's pretty lousy, the reality is Jack might actually not know that the government hacked him. That's because this rule, Rule 41, weakens notification requirements, so the government only has to make, quote, reasonable efforts to notify the hacking victim. If the government breaks Jack's computer, the government is not going to be tripping over themselves to tell Jack all about it, and he's not going to be the wiser, in my view. Now, when people talk to the government about these concerns, I think you can guess the response from the Justice Department. They basically say, trust us. And they have actually said, this is what astounds me, that if you're going to let one judge with one warrant hack millions of computers, and in the example I gave, expose somebody to being harmed twice, they said this is just kind of an administrative kind of thing, sort of a modest kind of matter. Why are people, they're mostly talking about me, why are people getting all worked up about it? You know, what's the big deal going on here? Why should anybody be concerned? So, let's go back. I don't have a lot of confidence that a government that couldn't keep sensitive OPM records safe or set up a consistently working healthcare website on the first try is going to be able to hack thousands and thousands, possibly millions of computer systems without doing some damage to important systems. And if you bungle a government hack, you could really do damage to hospitals, the power grid, transportation, and if anybody is having trouble sleeping at night, I wrote an op-ed article on this with Matt Blaze and Susan Landau in Wired, and I think you've got two very knowledgeable people who let me ride along, talk about why this change in Rule 41 is so dangerous and why trust us isn't good enough. And I've introduced a bill. It's called the Stop Mass Hacking Act. And my wife says, do not do your shaking your head imitation. But that's what the bill is, SMH Act. Shaking my head. Stopping mass hacking. And if the bill doesn't pass, I think a lot of people are going to say to their United States senators, what in the heck were you doing while this happened? So I will tell you that I feel very strongly that in a dangerous world, the government has got to have the authority to track and catch dangerous terrorists and criminals. I sit on the Intelligence Committee. My older child calls it the so-called Intelligence Committee. But on a serious note, it is a dangerous world out there, folks. I want it understood it's a dangerous world. And in the Freedom Act, I said, look, I have been working as hard as about anybody to protect the privacy of law-abiding Americans. But when you have an emergency, we'll give them some additional authority to deal with an emergency. So I get that. But what I'm concerned about is too often, over the past decade, intelligence and law enforcement officials have chosen approaches that sweep up information from millions of innocent Americans instead of targeting terrorists and criminals. Those approaches are what has to end. We have to prove to elected officials, and if you're talking to candidates, that we here at home understand that security and liberty are not mutually exclusive. If you understand technology, we can have both. Let's make sure we get them. Thank you. Thank you all.